"Sir, you're being cited for disturbing the peace on your own land." Those words nearly escaped the officer's lips before I presented my property title. You see, this entitled neighbor had been tormenting our entire lakeside community for months, involving law enforcement against anyone who dared to breathe without her consent. She demanded $50,000 in damages, submitted fraudulent police reports, and even attempted to corrupt county officials to have me removed from my own property. The twist? She had no clue I owned the $800,000 estate she was leasing. Imagine sunrise breaking across Crystal Lake, the scent of cedar mixing with morning fog. Then suddenly patrol car lights begin flashing across my great-uncle's old retreat. Gravel shifts beneath wheels as two police vehicles arrive, and there stands Patricia Wellington, positioned on her estate's balcony in a fluorescent yellow robe, gesturing at me like I'm some master criminal. What would your reaction be if someone summoned police for you angling on your own land? Share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? I suspect many of you have your own HOA nightmare stories. I'm David, and 4 years ago, I believed I'd discovered paradise. After 2 decades in military procurement and a separation that felt like being crushed by an 18-wheeler, driven by my former spouse's attorney, I inherited my great-uncle's retreat on Crystal Lake, Wisconsin. Population 2,800, where the biggest excitement used to be Old Pete's dog snatching fish from neighboring piers. The retreat isn't elaborate. A 1970s chalet situated on 3 acres of pure bliss. Each dawn I'd awaken to herons calling across glass-smooth waters, step onto pier planks polished smooth by 4 decades of Wisconsin seasons, and inhale air so pure it made my lungs forget about 20 years of military exhaust. The place carried memories of my youth. Aged oak mixed with pine sap and that crisp metallic aroma of lake water at daybreak. For 3 blissful years, Crystal Lake lived up to its tranquil reputation. 52 properties scattered around 10 miles of coastline, a blend of working-class locals and vacation families, all following one unspoken code. Acknowledge each other with waves, assist during emergencies, and respect everyone's privacy otherwise. Then Hurricane Patricia struck. She purchased the most ostentatious structure on the lake, a $800,000 monstrosity that resembled someone had airlifted a suburban Phoenix mansion into the Wisconsin wilderness by mistake. Within her opening week, she'd made herself known to the entire lake via her speedboat, consistently sporting those blindingly white slacks and sweaters bright enough to guide aircraft. Saccharine on the surface, but her gaze cold as February ice. The morning everything shifted, I sat on my pier with coffee that tasted like liquid tranquility, when I heard the deep growl of an overpowered speedboat slicing through the morning stillness like a buzzsaw through velvet. Greetings. Hello there, neighbor. Patricia's voice traveled across the water with all the warmth of an IRS audit. She approached my pier wearing a grin that would have impressed a carnival barker. I'm Patricia Wellington from the Premier Manor across the bay. Premier Manor? Sweet mercy. I'm here representing the Homeowners Association, she declared, producing a legal folder with the dramatic presentation of a television host unveiling grand prizes. The Crystal Lake Property Association has established new aesthetic requirements, and unfortunately your rustic arrangement doesn't align with our community standards. I placed my coffee cup down with such force it chimed against the wooden railing like a warning bell. What Homeowners Association? Her artificial smile fractured just enough to reveal her true nature. The organization that safeguards our property investments from deteriorating influences. That fishing vessel needs removal, and honestly, the angling equipment everywhere makes this area resemble a tackle shop explosion. My deteriorating influence was a 1998 aluminum boat that had landed more fish than her fancy floating palace ever would. The scattered equipment consisted of my great-uncle's hand-carved rod stands and a tackle collection older than her pretenses. Madam, this land has belonged to my family since before your birth. There's no HOA covenant in my title, and there certainly won't be one. The facade completely crumbled. Her tone dropped to Arctic levels. We shall see about that, won't we? Military man? She gunned that speedboat engine like escaping a felony scene, generating waves that crashed into my pier hard enough to overturn my coffee. The stench of burning fuel and costly fragrance hung in the morning air like a warning, contaminating the clean pine atmosphere until it churned my stomach. as I observed her mansion's windows gleaming in the sunrise like a predator's eyes. That familiar military intuition activated, the same instinct that preserved me through 4 deployments. This wasn't merely some property disagreement. This was warfare, and I sensed I'd just been conscripted. 4 days later, I discovered an envelope attached to my entrance like a citation from hell. Inside lay the most elaborate work of fiction I'd encountered since my ex-spouse's alimony demands. Crystal Lake Property Association violation notice blazed across premium letterhead in crimson letters. Apparently, I owed them $750 for failure to maintain waterfront aesthetic standards and had 25 days to comply or face additional penalties and potential property liens. The document appeared impressively official: governmental seals, reference numbers, even legal-sounding terminology that would panic most people into writing checks. Unfortunately for Patricia, it held less value than the paper supporting it, though most wouldn't realize that. Time for intelligence gathering. The county records basement smelled like aged leather and shattered aspirations, where dust particles danced in fluorescent lighting like microscopic spirits of bureaucratic disasters past. My military experience taught me that superior intelligence always originates from people who've been processing paperwork longer than you've been existing. So I befriended Margaret, the 70-something county registrar. "Another HOA casualty, dear?" she whispered, retrieving my property documents with hands slightly trembling from age. "That Wellington woman has visited here 8 times this month, inquiring about enforcement procedures and lien powers. Confidentially, honey. She understands property law about as well as my cat understands calculus. My deed was unambiguous. No covenants, no limitations, no HOA jurisdiction whatsoever. But here's where my logistics training proved valuable. Always investigate what the adversary is actually accomplishing while they're distracting you with paperwork theatrics. Patricia's Crystal Lake Property Association existed indeed. Incorporated 20 months ago with precisely 14 members from 52 lake properties. Legally speaking, they possessed about as much authority over my land as my neighbor's goldfish. But while examining ownership records, something triggered my fraud detector. Multiple lakefront properties had recently transferred to Wellington Enterprises LLC. A swift internet investigation revealed the reality. Our self-designated HOA monarch was operating an unlicensed vacation rental operation, converting peaceful family cabins into party destinations for Milwaukee tourists. The woman lecturing me about community values was actually demolishing them. I remembered something my great-uncle used to say: "Before challenging authority, ensure you understand who actually holds power." Wise man. He'd also taught me that most county documents are publicly accessible: property ownership, business, permits, covenant restrictions, all searchable online without cost. Remarkable what you discover when you actually research instead of merely intimidating people. Armed with this intelligence, I decided to gauge community opinion through strategic social media reconnaissance. Facebook might be where intelligence goes to expire, but it's also where you learn who's actually observing in your neighborhood. My post was straightforward. Has anyone else received violation notices from the Crystal Lake HOA? Asking for informational purposes. My phone erupted like a fireworks warehouse. 12 different lake residents sent private messages, each with their own Patricia horror story. She'd been systematically working around the lake like some legal intimidation cyclone, threatening elderly widows about bird baths and young families about fence colors. Sandra, a retired school administrator with organizational abilities that would make the Pentagon envious, had been recording everything in a detailed binder. Mike from the boat launch shared photographs of Patricia's returned checks and unpaid marina bills. Even 85-year-old Eleanor contributed observations about suspicious late-night activity at Patricia's alleged family rentals. I established a private group chat called Crystal Lake Truth Coalition, because if you're going to combat madness, you might as well embrace the superhero drama. That evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. Patricia's voice seeped through the speaker like syrup mixed with industrial acid. "David, darling, I noticed your charming little Facebook inquiry. You're making this unnecessarily complicated for yourself. Just seeking information, Patricia. Neighborly interest." "Oh, sweetheart, you really don't want to pursue this path with me?" Her voice shifted to that particular tone people use when they're planning to obliterate your financial standing. "I have resources you couldn't fathom, and I will absolutely contact the proper authorities regarding harassment and cyberbullying." The line died, leaving me staring at my phone and wondering what kind of resources a vacation rental fraudster believed she possessed with local law enforcement. As evening descended over the lake, I sat on my pier, listening to the gentle rhythm of waves against weathered wood, breathing air that still carried freedom and fried walleye. The sunset painted everything golden, including the Truth Coalition members' homes scattered around the shoreline like lighthouse beacons. Patricia had committed one critical error. She'd initiated combat with someone who actually understood intelligence gathering before engaging in warfare. If Patricia thought Facebook drama would intimidate me, she clearly hadn't researched military veterans. We don't surrender. We adapt, overcome, and occasionally overthink everything until dawn while developing 20 different tactical approaches. Wednesday morning delivered an unexpected visitor, Carl Jenkins from County Code Enforcement, appearing about as excited as someone facing dental surgery. His pickup truck ground across my gravel driveway at precisely 8:30 a.m., because apparently Patricia believed in punctuality when filing fraudulent complaints. "Mr. David, sorry to disturb you, but I must investigate reports about pier violations and an abandoned vehicle." Carl looked mortified, which revealed everything I needed to understand about Patricia's accusation quality. I served him coffee that actually resembled coffee instead of the toxic waste they provide at government facilities, and we walked down to examine my supposedly criminal pier arrangement. Carl measured everything repeatedly, consulted his clipboard, then shook his head like someone who'd squandered his morning on nonsense. "Between us," he said, lowering his voice despite our solitude, "this is the 27th complaint I've received from the same address in 7 months. Lady has county services on speed dial." That's when Carl mentioned something intriguing. Patricia had actually attempted to slip him a $150 bill during their previous encounter, claiming it was a consultation fee for discovering creative interpretations of building regulations. The woman wasn't merely playing neighborhood dictator. She was testing waters for minor corruption. My great-uncle always said, "You can evaluate people by how they treat service workers and public employees." Apparently, Patricia's approach was to either intimidate them or purchase their cooperation. That evening, the Truth Coalition attended Patricia's emergency HOA meeting as observers, which was about as democratic as a totalitarian election. The assembly occurred in her mansion's main room, a space so aggressively decorated it resembled a furniture showroom explosion in shades of cream and bronze. Only 7 people attended, mostly property managers from her rental operation who appeared they'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Patricia had prepared an elaborate PowerPoint presentation titled, "Preserving Our Community Investment," complete with graphs about property values and photographs of non-compliant properties that somehow all belonged to people who declined joining her HOA. Sandra, bless her educator instincts, documented everything like she was recording war crimes. But the real intelligence came when she noticed Patricia constantly checking an expensive timepiece and nervously glancing toward the kitchen. During the restroom break, because nothing says professional meeting like a bathroom break in someone's living room, Sandra followed Patricia and overheard a heated telephone conversation. "I promise the payments are coming," Patricia hissed into her phone. "These people are more resistant than anticipated, but I have new approaches. Legal pressure, code enforcement, whatever's necessary." The pieces began connecting like a puzzle constructed from warning signs. This wasn't about community standards or property values. Someone was applying financial pressure to Patricia, and she was frantically attempting to generate income through harassment and intimidation. I'd observed this pattern before in the military. People under extreme stress make increasingly desperate choices until they cross boundaries they never imagined they'd cross. The question remained, who was controlling Patricia's financial strings? My answer arrived faster than expected. While investigating her attorney, the same individual who'd sent me that threatening cease and desist letter, I discovered he specialized in foreclosure defense and debt collection. Not exactly the type of lawyer you hire for neighborhood disputes, unless you're already drowning in legal troubles. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I filed my own complaint against Patricia for harassment, submitting false reports and abusing county resources for personal vendettas. 2 could play the bureaucracy game, and I'd had extensive practice navigating military red tape. Then I escalated. Further, using the property management company's contact information from the rental advertisements, I contacted the actual owner of Patricia's mansion. Turns out Lakefront Property Management was extremely interested to learn about their tenants' creative interpretation of lease agreements and unauthorized business activities. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez, who'd been tracking the complaint pattern from our lake, approached me privately after I filed my counter-complaint. Unofficially, he said, leaning against his patrol car while evening light caught the lake like scattered gems. We've been documenting everything. Nothing criminal yet, but she's walking a very narrow line, and we're monitoring. That night, sitting on my pier with the sound of gentle waves mixing with distant laughter from an authentic family cookout across the lake, I realized Patricia had made a fundamental tactical mistake. She'd assumed everyone would surrender like frightened civilians. Instead, she'd accidentally unified a community that had been peacefully minding its own business for decades. The aroma of charcoal and honest conversation drifted across the water, mixing with the pine-scented evening air that still meant home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight the righteous were prevailing. If Patricia thought code enforcement was her ultimate weapon, she clearly hadn't advanced to actual weapons of mass bureaucratic destruction yet. That honor was reserved for what occurred at 6:45 a.m. on a Friday morning that began peacefully and went sideways faster than a startled deer at a county fair. I was enjoying my morning coffee ritual, that sacred first sip that makes you believe the world might not be completely mad, when the unmistakable crunch of patrol car tires on gravel shattered the lake's morning serenity. Blue lights strobed across my cabin walls like some twisted northern lights, and I could practically sense Patricia's satisfaction radiating from her mansion balcony across the water. 2 officers emerged from their cruiser, appearing about as enthusiastic as security guards called to handle a senior citizen protest. The younger officer had that fresh-faced sincerity of someone who still believed every emergency call was legitimate. His partner, a weathered veteran with corporal stripes and the tired expression of someone who'd witnessed every variety of human foolishness, clearly recognized this would be another waste of taxpayer money. Mr. David, we've received reports that you're trespassing on private property and made threatening statements toward a female resident. I invited them inside for coffee because, honestly, if you're going to be falsely accused at dawn, you might as well be civilized about it. The senior officer, Corporal Thompson according to his name tag, accepted gratefully, probably because he knew government coffee tastes like liquid disappointment mixed with budget constraints. "Sir, we must respond to all calls," Thompson said, settling into my great-uncle's old kitchen chair that creaked like a ship in rough seas. "But confidentially, this complaint doesn't smell right." That's when I produced my secret weapon. Documentation, security camera footage, property titles, the complete timeline of Patricia's harassment campaign, and even Carl, the code enforcement officer's written statement about attempted bribery. My military experience taught me that paperwork wins wars, and this particular battle was about to become very one-sided. Thompson reviewed the footage of my supposed threatening behavior, which showed me helping elderly Eleanor load her fishing equipment into her vehicle, while Patricia lurked behind her mansion's windows like some suburban espionage villain. The trespassing occurred on a public access road that had been public since before Patricia was born, despite the shiny new private property sign she'd posted overnight like some kind of legal fairy. "Sir," Thompson muttered, shaking his head at the footage, "either you're the world's most polite terrorist or somebody's been wasting our time." While the officers were examining my evidence, my phone rang. Rick Morrison, a private investigator who worked part-time at the local bait shop and looked like he could wrestle a moose, had completed the background check I'd commissioned. What he'd discovered would have made a daytime drama writer weep with envy. Patricia Wellington owed $52,000 in unpaid HOA fees from her previous community in Minneapolis. The irony was so thick you could slice it with a butter knife and serve it at the county fair. She'd been sued by that HOA and lost, which explained her intimate knowledge of legal intimidation tactics. More troubling, she owed money to everyone, from contractors to credit card companies, with a pattern of using legal threats to delay payments until creditors surrendered or settled for cents. But here's where it became really fascinating. Rick had discovered that Patricia's rental operation violated 4 different zoning ordinances, none of which required business licenses she'd never bothered obtaining. The county had no record of her vacation rental business, which meant she'd been operating illegally while lecturing everyone else about community standards. The Truth Coalition had expanded to 18 lake residents, each with their own Patricia horror story. Mike at the boat launch revealed she owed $4,100 in dock fees and had threatened to sue him for discrimination when he demanded payment. The hardware store owner shared security footage of Patricia ordering supplies, then disputing the charges, with her credit card company, claiming defective materials she'd never returned. The pattern was clear as lake water on a calm morning. Patricia used legal intimidation to avoid paying legitimate debts, hoping people would rather write off the loss than fight her in court. Thompson finished reviewing my documentation and shook his head like someone who just realized he'd been chasing phantoms. "Mr. David, I strongly recommend you consider filing charges for submitting false police reports. This lady's been using us as her personal enforcement department, and that ends today." As the officers drove away, their tires crunching across gravel that now sounded like victory, I noticed Patricia's silhouette vanishing from her mansion window. The morning mist was rising off the lake, carrying with it the clean scent of pine and possibility. My attorney had scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning, claiming he had news that would change everything. Something in his voice suggested Patricia's house of cards was about to collapse in ways she never anticipated. The herons called across the water, their haunting song mixing with the distant sound of normal people starting their day without threatening lawsuits or bribing public officials. Benjamin Fletcher had been my great-uncle's attorney since Reagan was president, and at 81, he still dressed like he was arguing cases before the Supreme Court. His office smelled like aged leather and expensive cigars, with law books stacked so high they threatened to topple and bury unsuspecting clients in centuries of legal precedent. "David, you might want to sit down for this," Benjamin said, adjusting wire-rimmed glasses that had probably witnessed the signing of the Declaration of Independence. "I've been reviewing your great-uncle's estate more thoroughly, and there's something we overlooked." He spread documents across his mahogany desk like a card player revealing a royal flush. Property deeds, trust agreements, and corporation papers, all bearing signatures and dates I'd never seen before. "When your great-uncle died, you inherited more than just the cabin," Benjamin continued, his voice carrying that careful tone attorneys use when they're about to detonate bombs. "In 1989, he created the Northwoods Property Trust as a tax shelter. You now own 65% controlling interest in a trust that holds 5 lakefront properties." My coffee mug stopped halfway. To my lips, 5 properties, including the $800,000 mansion currently occupied by one Patricia Wellington. The words hit me like being slapped with a cold fish. I'd been fighting my own tenant without knowing it. For 4 years, Patricia had been paying rent to a property management company that deposited her payments into an account I never knew existed. The woman who'd been terrorizing me about property standards was literally putting money in my pocket every month. Benjamin pulled out a lease agreement thick enough to stop bullets. "Your great-uncle was meticulous. This lease includes clauses about peaceful enjoyment of neighboring properties, prohibition of unlicensed business activities, and maintaining community harmony. Ms. Wellington has violated approximately 16 different terms. The irony was so perfect, it felt like cosmic intervention. Patricia had been harassing her own landlord while falling behind on rent payments, operating illegal businesses in violation of her lease, and systematically disturbing other tenants in the same property trust. How behind is she on rent?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. 3 months with late fees accumulating. The property management company was actually preparing eviction proceedings, but they needed trust approval. That's you, by the way. I stared at the documents, my mind processing 4 years of deposited payments I'd attributed to some mysterious inheritance account. Patricia's desperate behavior suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't just facing harassment complaints and zoning violations. She was about to lose her headquarters for the entire rental operation. "Benjamin, she doesn't know I'm her landlord, does she?" His weathered face cracked into a smile that belonged in a courtroom victory photograph. "Not unless she's considerably more intelligent than her recent behavior suggests." The strategic implications hit me like a tactical revelation. I could evict Patricia immediately for lease violations, but that felt like winning through technicality rather than justice. My great-uncle had always taught me that real power meant knowing when not to use it. "What would you recommend?" Benjamin leaned back in his chair, which creaked like old ship timber in a storm. "Give her one final opportunity to make this right. Document everything, offer mediation. Demonstrate you attempted to resolve things reasonably. Courts appreciate landlords who exhaust diplomatic options before pulling the nuclear trigger." But if she escalated further, Benjamin tapped the eviction notice he'd already prepared. 30 days to vacate for multiple lease violations. Clean, legal, and absolutely devastating to her financial house of cards. I walked out of Benjamin's office, feeling like I'd discovered I'd been playing chess, while everyone else thought we were playing checkers. The afternoon sun painted Main Street golden, and for the first time in months I felt like the universe might actually have a sense of humor. Patricia Wellington, HOA dictator and vacation rental queen, had been paying her worst enemy to let her destroy his peace and quiet. Sometimes the best revenge is discovering you held all the cards from the very beginning. You know that feeling when you're assembling furniture and suddenly realize you've been holding the instruction manual upside down for 4 hours. That's exactly how I felt walking out of Benjamin's office, except instead of a wobbly bookshelf, I'd accidentally become the landlord of my own worst enemy. Time to build a case that would make television courtroom dramas weep with professional jealousy. Benjamin became my strategic advisor, channeling decades of courtroom wisdom into what he called the nuclear option playbook. His office transformed into mission control with manila folders spreading across every surface like legal vegetation. The man had been filing documents since Kennedy was president, and he approached this case with the methodical precision of a Swiss clockmaker. "Think of landlord-tenant law like coaching a sports team," Benjamin explained, tapping his fountain pen against yellow legal pads. "You establish clear rules. Players follow them, or they're permanently benched. No personal feelings, just consequences. For documented violations." Rick Morrison, my private investigator who could probably track a ghost through a blizzard, delivered his final report with the satisfied expression of someone who'd struck gold in someone else's backyard. Patricia owed $81,000 across multiple creditors, had tax liens pending on her previous Minneapolis property, and a credit score that made high-risk loans look attractive. "Here's something your viewers should know," Rick said, sliding papers across Benjamin's desk. "You can search public records online for anyone's property liens, judgments, and tax issues in most counties. Knowledge is power in disputes, and most of this information costs nothing but time to find." Sandra, our retired educator turned intelligence analyst, had organized the community documentation project with efficiency that would make the CIA weep with envy. Her 3-ring binder contained time-stamped photographs, witness statements, and a cross-referenced index of Patricia's harassment incidents that read like a criminal psychology textbook. The boat launch owner provided receipts for unpaid bills and photocopies of returned checks, Sandra reported, adjusting reading glasses that had seen more neighborhood drama than a soap opera writer's fever dreams. Local contractors shared identical stories about payment disputes followed by legal threats. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez, who'd been tracking complaint patterns with the dedication of a bloodhound following bacon grease, provided guidance that straddled the line between official procedure and friendly advice. "Document everything," he emphasized, leaning against Benjamin's filing cabinet. "Courts want to see that reasonable people attempted reasonable solutions before things escalated." The technical preparation felt like planning a military operation, if military operations involved elderly, educators and small-town lawyers plotting the downfall of vacation rental empires. I installed additional security cameras with audio recording capability, because apparently my property had become more monitored than a federal courthouse. Security cameras with audio can legally record on your own property in most states, Benjamin noted, checking local statutes in a book thick enough to stop small arms fire. Always verify local laws first, but documented evidence beats he said, she said every time. We developed what Benjamin called the escalation protocol, a step-by-step plan that would give Patricia every opportunity to save face, while documenting her refusal to act reasonably. First, I'd approach her as a concerned neighbor offering mediation through county community services. If she refused or escalated, we'd reveal the landlord relationship publicly at the next town council meeting. Sandra researched parliamentary procedure like she was preparing for a Senate hearing, while Benjamin prepared legal notice templates for every possible scenario. The man had contingency plans for his contingency plans, including backup strategies that involved everything from zoning enforcement to potential criminal charges for filing false police reports. Always give someone a face-saving way out of conflict, Benjamin advised, organizing documents with the precision of a medieval monk illuminating manuscripts. Courts appreciate parties who attempted reasonable resolution, and juries hate bullies who refuse reasonable offers. The Truth Coalition had evolved into a neighborhood watch program that would make the NSA proud. 18 Lake residents coordinated, through our group chat, sharing real-time updates about Patricia's increasingly erratic behavior. Mike at the boat launch agreed to document any future incidents, while local businesses committed to supporting our paper trail with their own harassment documentation. We even prepared media contacts in case the situation reached public interest levels. The local newspaper editor had already expressed curiosity about the lake dispute, especially after hearing whispers about bribery attempts and zoning violations. The community protection aspect felt like something from a feel-good movie, except with more legal documentation and fewer musical numbers. Several elderly neighbors installed security cameras after Patricia's intimidation visits, while Truth Coalition members started accompanying vulnerable residents during errands to prevent isolated confrontations. As I sat in Benjamin's office that evening, surrounded by evidence folders and strategic planning documents, the smell of old law books mixing with Sandra's homemade cookies and the faint aroma of Rick's cigar smoke, I realized we'd accidentally created something beautiful, a community that refused to be bullied. Tomorrow, I'd give Patricia one final chance to choose dignity over destruction. After that, the nuclear option was locked and loaded. If Patricia thought my growing community support was just neighborly conversation, she clearly hadn't been paying attention to the tactical situation developing around her. What happened next proved that desperate people make spectacularly stupid decisions, especially when they're cornered like rabid raccoons in designer sweaters. The sabotage started subtly, which should have been my first warning that Patricia had graduated from amateur harassment to genuine criminal behavior. She'd been monitoring our Truth Coalition activities through Facebook stalking that would make a teenage ex-girlfriend proud, creating fake profiles to gather intelligence and spread counter-narratives about my supposed instability. Wednesday night. My security cameras captured something that made my military paranoia look like casual concern. At 2:23 a.m., a pickup truck matching her handyman's vehicle crept past my pier like a suburban ninja mission gone wrong. The driver wore a baseball cap pulled low, but the truck's license plate was clearly visible under my new LED floodlights. Thursday morning brought a surprise that would have ruined my day if I hadn't learned to expect the worst from people wearing too much perfume and carrying legal threats. My fishing boat was sitting half-submerged at the pier, looking like a maritime crime scene. The drain plug had been removed with surgical precision. Not loose, not damaged, just gone. $3,200 in water damage to the motor and electronics. Plus, tackle equipment that had been in my family longer than Patricia had been alive. The smell of lake water mixed with oil and gasoline created an aromatic cocktail that screamed insurance claim and criminal charges. But here's where Patricia's desperation revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of how evidence works in the 21st century. My security cameras had captured everything in glorious high-definition detail, complete with audio of her handyman muttering about crazy lady jobs while he worked. I filed the police report with the methodical precision of someone who'd been documenting harassment for months. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez arrived within an hour, took one look at the video evidence, and shook his head like someone watching taxpayer money circle the drain. This crossed a line, Martinez said, examining the deliberately removed drain plug. Property damage is a felony if it exceeds $200, and your electronics alone put this in serious criminal territory. While I was dealing with insurance adjusters and marine mechanics, Patricia was apparently having her own version of a nervous breakdown across the lake. Truth Coalition members reported increasingly erratic behavior that made her previous harassment look like polite conversation. She'd started approaching elderly neighbors with the subtlety of a door-to-door cult recruiter, demanding they choose sides in what she called the lake war. Eleanor, bless her 85-year-old heart, told Patricia exactly where she could stick her loyalty demands, using language that would make a sailor blush and a Sunday school teacher take notes. Mike at the boat launch finally banned Patricia from the fuel dock after she screamed at a teenage employee about conspiracy pricing and discrimination against successful businesswomen. The kid was making $9 an hour and probably couldn't spell conspiracy, much less orchestrate one against vacation rental queens. The grocery store incident became local legend within 24 hours. Patricia had a complete meltdown at the checkout line, accusing the cashier of overcharging her and demanding to speak to corporate headquarters about systematic harassment of professional women. The manager, a patient woman who dealt with everything from coupon fraud to holiday shopping madness, asked Patricia to leave after she started filming other customers while shouting about witnesses to discrimination. But the real intelligence goldmine came from Sandra's library research skills, which had uncovered Patricia's residential history going back 10 years. The pattern was identical at every address: neighbor disputes escalating to harassment complaints, accusations of unstable and dangerous behavior directed at anyone who stood up to her, and eventual departure under circumstances that suggested legal pressure. Previous landlords described identical escalation patterns ending in eviction proceedings. One Minneapolis property manager had documented a restraining order after Patricia threatened to destroy a neighbor who complained about her unlicensed pet grooming operation. Another apartment complex had security footage of her vandalizing cars belonging to residents who'd reported noise violations. Meanwhile, my silent preparation intensified like a military operation approaching 0 hour. Benjamin filed a restraining order documenting the property damage and harassment pattern. We coordinated with the insurance investigator about potential fraud charges, since Patricia's handyman had conveniently developed amnesia about his late-night marina visits. The pressure was building from multiple directions. Online reviews for Patricia's vacation rentals started mentioning unstable management and neighborhood disputes, causing her booking rates to plummet faster than her credit score. The property management company received formal complaints about tenant behavior that violated community standards. County zoning enforcement had begun their formal investigation into unlicensed business operations, while the local newspaper editor started asking uncomfortable questions about corruption allegations and harassment patterns. As I sat on my repaired pier that evening, listening to the gentle splash of waves against new bumpers and breathing air that smelled like victory mixed with pine needles, I realized Patricia had made one final tactical error. She'd turned criminal behavior into documented evidence that would destroy her in any court of law. When desperate people run out of legal options, they usually do one of two things: accept defeat gracefully, or double down on stupidity until they achieve legendary status. Patricia, being Patricia, chose door number 2 with the enthusiasm of a kamikaze pilot heading for an aircraft carrier. What happened next would have been hilarious if it wasn't so pathetically criminal. County Commissioner William Hayes had been serving Cedar Falls for 14 years without a single ethics complaint, which made Patricia's approach about as welcome as a tornado at a church picnic. According to Bill's later testimony, she strutted into his office Wednesday morning carrying a designer purse and the kind of confidence that comes from inhaling your own supply of entitlement. Commissioner Hayes: "I have a proposition that could benefit both of us," Patricia had announced, sliding an envelope across his desk like she was buying state secrets instead of trying to bribe a small-town politician who probably made less than her monthly shoe budget.